The dust settled over the battle-scarred plains, a silent witness to the fierce battles that had raged there. The ground, once vibrant with life, now lay desolate, marked by the scars of conflict and the echoes of clashing swords. David, a warrior forged in the crucible of conflict, led his men back towards Ziklag. Each step they took was heavy with the weight of their recent victory, their bodies weary, but their spirits high. They had faced the Amalekites and emerged victorious, a testament to their strength and unity. Victory hung in the air, a tangible presence after their hard-fought triumph over the Amalekites. The soldiers' faces were alight with the glow of success, their hearts swelling with pride. They had fought bravely, and now they looked forward to the warm embrace of home. Yet, a shadow stretched before them, a premonition of unease that tempered their joy. The path ahead seemed darker, as if forewarning them of the trials yet to come. The soldiers exchanged wary glances, their jubilation giving way to a creeping sense of dread.
Ziklag, our refuge, our sanctuary, it's been ravaged. The words hung heavy in the air, a stark contrast to the earlier cheers of victory. The sight of their beloved city in ruins was a blow to their hearts, a cruel reminder of the cost of war.
Smoke stained the sky, a grim testament to the brutality that awaited them. The once clear skies were now choked with the acrid scent of burning wood and the remnants of their shattered lives. It was a scene of utter devastation, a stark reminder of the fragility of peace. David's heart pounded in his chest, a drumbeat of dread accompanying each step closer to home. The closer he got, the more his fear grew, each heartbeat echoing the pain and loss that awaited him. His mind raced with thoughts of what he might find, the faces of his loved ones flashing before his eyes. The Amalekites, those ruthless raiders, had visited their wrath upon the city, leaving devastation in their wake. They had shown no mercy, their attacks swift and brutal. The once bustling streets of Ziklag were now silent, the echoes of life replaced by the haunting stillness of destruction.
This victory, hard won and complete, feels hollow in the face of such loss. The words were spoken with a heavy heart, the weight of their hollow victory pressing down on them. They had fought bravely, but the sight of their ruined home made their triumph seem meaningless.
The stench of smoke mingled with the metallic tang of blood, creating a nauseating cocktail that filled the air. It was a smell that spoke of death and destruction, a grim reminder of the price they had paid. The battlefield, once a place of glory, was now a scene of horror. The laughter and cheers of victory died on the lips of David's men as they absorbed the scene before them. Their joy was replaced by shock and sadness, their hearts heavy with the weight of their loss. They had returned home expecting to celebrate, but instead, they were met with devastation. Ziklag, once a haven, was now a graveyard of shattered dreams. The city that had once been their refuge was now a place of sorrow, its streets filled with the remnants of their broken lives. It was a sight that would haunt them for years to come. Women wept for lost husbands, their cries echoing through the ruins. Their grief was a palpable presence, a testament to the lives that had been torn apart by the cruel hand of war. They clung to each other, seeking comfort in their shared sorrow. Children cried out for mothers, silenced by the cruel hand of war. Their innocent voices were filled with confusion and fear, their young minds unable to comprehend the horrors they had witnessed. They huddled together, seeking solace in each other's presence.
I've led my men to victory against one enemy, only to be greeted by the devastation wrought by another. The words were spoken with a heavy heart, the weight of their hollow victory pressing down on them. They had fought bravely, but the sight of their ruined home made their triumph seem meaningless.
The weight of leadership pressed down on him, heavier than any armor he had ever borne. The responsibility of his people's suffering was a burden he could not escape. He felt the crushing weight of their expectations and their pain, a constant reminder of the cost of leadership. Heavier than any armor he had ever borne. The physical weight of his armor was nothing compared to the emotional burden he carried. Each piece of armor he removed felt like a small relief, but the true weight remained on his shoulders. In that moment, amidst the ruins of his home, David understood that true leadership meant shouldering the pain of his people as much as sharing in their triumphs. He realized that being a leader was not just about leading them to victory, but also about standing with them in their darkest moments. It was a lesson he would carry with him for the rest of his life, a reminder of the true cost of leadership. 3 days. 3 days of mourning and rebuilding. The air was thick with sorrow, the weight of loss pressing down on everyone. The community, though shattered, found solace in unity, coming together to rebuild what was lost. 3 days where the victory over the Amalekites felt like a distant memory. The triumph that once filled their hearts was now overshadowed by the grim reality of their losses. David, his spirit bruised but unbroken, had rallied his men. He spoke with a fervor that reignited the fire in their hearts, reminding them of their strength and resilience. They worked tirelessly, clearing debris, tending to the wounded, offering comfort to the grieving. Each act of kindness, each moment of solidarity, was a step towards healing. Yet, a question lingered in the air, unspoken but ever present. It was a question that gnawed at their hearts, a question that demanded an answer.
What news from the north? What of Saul, the troubled king, and his loyal son Jonathan? The uncertainty was a heavy burden, one that weighed heavily on David's mind.
David, bound by loyalty and a love that ran deeper than blood, yearned for news. His heart ached with the need to know, to understand the fate of those he held dear. He prayed for their safety, but fear, like a serpent's tongue, whispered doubts in his heart. Each prayer was a plea for mercy, a hope that the worst had not come to pass. And then, on the third day, a figure emerged from the horizon, a solitary silhouette against the vast expanse, moving with a purpose that drew everyone's attention. A lone man, his clothing torn and dusty, stumbled towards them. His steps were heavy, each one a testament to the trials he had faced. Exhaustion etched lines on his face, but it was the look in his eyes, the haunted despair, that spoke volumes. It was a look that told of unspeakable horrors, of a journey fraught with peril.
This man, he has looked upon tragedy. His eyes, windows to a soul burdened by grief, revealed the depth of his sorrow.
David, his senses honed by years of living on the edge of a knife, recognized the signs. He knew that this man carried news that would change everything. He went out to meet the messenger, hope and dread warring within him. Each step was a battle between the desire for good news and the fear of the worst. The man fell to his knees before David, a broken supplicant bearing tidings of woe. His posture spoke of defeat, of a burden too heavy to bear alone. His voice, hoarse with exhaustion and grief, cracked as he spoke, each word a hammer blow to David's heart. The news he carried was a heavy weight, one that would test the strength of even the bravest of men.
Your servant was on Mount Gilboa.
The messenger gasped, his words tumbling over each other in his haste to deliver his burden of sorrow. David listened, his own breath catching in his throat, as the messenger painted a scene of unimaginable carnage.
The Philistines, those ancient enemies of Israel, had driven deep into our land. Saul, the anointed king, led his army against them, but the tide of battle turned against us.
The Philistine army, a relentless tide of iron and fury, had overwhelmed Saul's forces on the slopes of Mount Gilboa.
Saul and Jonathan fought with the courage of lions, even as the tide turned against them. But bravery was no match for the overwhelming might of the Philistine army.
Saul, wounded and despairing, had chosen to fall on his own sword rather than be captured by his enemies.
And Jonathan, David's beloved Jonathan, had fallen by his side, their bond unbroken even in death.
David's world tilted on its axis. His friend, his brother, gone. Saul, his tormentor, his king, gone. The news struck him like a physical blow, stealing the air from his lungs, leaving him gasping for breath in a world suddenly devoid of color. Grief's first sting hit David hard as he questioned the young messenger.
How do you know this?
David choked out, his voice a strangled whisper. His mind, refusing to accept the unbearable truth, clung to the desperate hope that the messenger was mistaken. Surely Jonathan, quick-witted and agile, could not have fallen. Surely Saul, for all his faults, would have found a way to escape the Philistine onslaught. But even as he voiced the question, he knew deep down that the messenger spoke the truth. The raw grief etched on the man's face, the way he avoided David's gaze, spoke volumes.
I was scavenging amongst the dead, hoping to find something of value, when I came across the bodies of Saul and Jonathan. Saul's armor, the royal insignia, and the crown lay beside his lifeless hand. I took it upon myself to end Saul's suffering. I delivered the final blow, granting him a merciful release from his pain.
David listened, a cold fury building within him, masking the raw agony of his grief. A king's justice and a heart's anguish intertwined as David faced the young man. The air was thick with tension, the weight of the moment pressing down on everyone present. David's eyes, usually so full of warmth and wisdom, were now cold and piercing, reflecting the gravity of the situation.
Your blood be on your own head. You have sealed your fate with your own words and actions.
David declared, his voice cold and steady despite the tempest raging within him. His heart ached with the loss of Saul and Jonathan, but his duty as a leader demanded unwavering resolve. The Amalekite, his face paling, began to protest, but David silenced him with a gesture. The young man's words caught in his throat, his eyes wide with fear and realization. This man, this scavenger of the battlefield, had dared to lay claim to the life of God's anointed king. He had come seeking a reward, thinking he would be praised for his actions. Whether driven by misguided mercy or a desire for reward, his actions were an affront to the divine order. The sanctity of the anointed could not be violated without consequence. David, his heart heavy with grief but his mind clear, knew that such transgression could not go unpunished. The weight of leadership bore down on him, demanding justice even in the face of personal sorrow.
You are self-condemned. Your own testimony has sealed your fate. You have said it yourself. You laid your hand on the Lord's anointed. There is no greater crime in the eyes of God and man.
The Amalekite, realizing the futility of argument, crumpled to the ground, his pleas for mercy dying on his lips. He had come seeking favor, but found only judgment. David turned away, unable to watch as his men carried out his sentence. The burden of leadership was heavy, and the cost of justice was steep. The death of the Amalekite would not bring back Saul and Jonathan, but it was a necessary act. It was a grim reminder that even in times of mourning, the rule of law must be upheld. It was an affirmation that even in their grief, justice must prevail. The kingdom could not afford to let such a transgression go unpunished, lest it set a dangerous precedent. Yet, as the echoes of the Amalekite's cries faded into the silence, David found no solace in his decision. The weight of his loss and the burden of his duty intertwined, leaving him in a state of profound sorrow. His heart, still reeling from the news of his loss, felt heavier than ever. The path of a leader was fraught with difficult choices, and this was one of the hardest he had ever faced. The memory of Saul and Jonathan lingered in his mind, a painful reminder of the cost of leadership and the price of justice.